Big, huge news, Slop Nation. Just been on the phone with the Mayan people in charge of calendars. Apparently the world's going to end in 2012. Also, Paradox is releasing dev diaries about some DLC or something. So, I have not been keeping up on my dev diaries. I've been waiting for quite a few of them to come out so we could do kind of a big episode looking at what's coming up for Hoi 4. And oh boy, there are some huge changes. Now, specifically, I want to talk about the dev diary that came out on the August 21st, Thursday to be specific, 2025. If somehow you've reached this video in a year past 2025, guess what? The DLC is probably out. Unless the Mayans were correct. But I think these few dev diaries we're going to look at today are going to be pretty game-changing for Hearts of Iron 4. First off, we have our first confirmation that I think, I'm not too sure if they mentioned it so far, but China will be getting a rework. That's right, Chinese Timmies. You may finally be able to call Tibet. Although it would be one hell of a gamer move if Paradox just didn't add that. I could respect it in a weird way. I do love how they kind of open up this dev diary with, it's a running theme that countries all around the world face major difficulties in the 1930s, and China was no exception. Can we just get a quick picture of what China in the 1930s looked like right now on the screen? Yeah, a little bit of difficulties. Embroiled in a fractious state of civil war, the central government of the Kuomintang held only nominal power while the local warlords, regional military leaders occupied significant tracts of land and privately controlled armies. It would be one of the smallest of these states led by the Chinese Communist Party, which would defy odds, run to power, and uniting all of China. So this dev diary mostly covers Communist China. There's a little bit at the bottom, actually covering Chiang Kai-shek and the Kuomintang, just a little bit though. But specifically, I wanted to go down to this new map of China. But as you can see, China's looking extra spicy today. We've got a whole bunch of more nations released, and I think one of the big things people always complain about is that China never looked that realistic to what it actually looked like in the time frame of Hoi 4. And I mean, for that, I can't blame Paradox too much. It was a very turbulent time for China. Things were always moving around, and on top of that, you know, records weren't the best, especially in China around that time. But they were definitely a bit egregious in grouping together a whole bunch of the warlords, giving them a bit more of a simple, you know, gloss over. But it does look like, you know, we're getting quite a lot more now for China. Whether or not this is going to be good or not, time will tell. But now that we've had a quick look at that, let's actually go look at a few of the Communist Chinese features. We do have a few dev diaries to go over today, so I won't be going too in-depth on each and every one, you know, individually. But I'm going to try and get a bunch of it here. So first off, one of our primary design goals here was to introduce a greater level of detail of Chinese content. This included changing the situation for the starting for the communists to be more accurate to the situation in 1936. They've been renamed to the Chinese Soviet Republic, the official name from 1931 to 1937, and Zhang Wenqian is now the nominal leader, and starting territory is altered as the communists do not control Yunnan in early 1936. So straight off the bat, Communist China, or we should say the Chinese Soviet Republic, patent pending, has definitely been nerfed, literally losing half of their state that they start with, and it's not like, you know, they were in a great position to start off with anyway, and you can actually just see the unit strength there, which, yeah, it's not going to be looking too great. Then we scroll down, of course, we have a new balance of power, Paradox's, you know, favorite new mechanic they've added, where you actually will go towards either the right side, which I believe is the Chinese Soviet, or yeah, the Bolsheviks are vying for power, or going to Mao Zedong. I mean, this was kind of in the game already, specifically with the paths you go down with Communist China. It wasn't exactly very flushed out. You can just pick between one of three paths, but now, you know, you actually will have to have, you know, a bit of an internal struggle here. And, you know, it is interesting they do go on to say a Communist China playthrough has always been one of the more challenging in the game as a result of starting situation, and our revamped approach is no different. As expected, you'll need to fight off Empire Japan, then attempt to reunify with the rest of China. It is kind of funny that they do say in several stages, which means maybe it might be a bit more of a protracted conflict, which, you know, usually if you play Communist China, you do really want to get Japan done and dealt with as quickly as you can, whereas this, maybe you're saying something a bit differently. I mean, obviously, like we've said on this channel before, I do think Paradox is trying to stretch the length of the game out just a little bit, so actually adding, I'm assuming, a bit more content to particular, Communist China and China in specific now, knowing that obviously you're going to have to defeat the Japanese, and I reckon this DLC is probably going to make that a bit more difficult. But, time will tell. Paradox can either make it, super easy unintentionally, or, make it way more difficult than it already was. And, it was a little bit difficult with the paths we have now and the content in the game for China, but I think a lot of people, it's been in the game a long time at this point. People have worked around it. They've figured out the best strats, the best gamey ways to do it. That, we can do it pretty quickly. Okay, one thing I'm actually looking at for Communist China in this is that, the infiltration is still in, where you will still be infiltrating states in China, which I don't know if you've ever watched one of my videos when I play Communist China. Not one of my favorite features. Off the bat, it does say like it's going to be 50 political power each, and then you get widespread infiltration, which grants chance sabotage, construction 10%, equipment capture ratio gain from, it's just a whole bunch of province modifiers, which not sure if I like or not. And I think they did say that a lot of this is subject to change, but I do find it pretty funny that they've just added, a way to infiltrate provinces, and it's just clicking decisions when we do have the intelligence agency in the game. And apparently, that's just never going to be expanded ever since La Resistance. I think that makes a bit more sense than just clicking a few buttons, but at the same time, I guess this is just easier. And the clumsiness and clunkiness of the intelligence agency is just such a pain to deal with. Even Paradox doesn't want to touch it. So for the most part, this does just look like an expansion of the system that was already in for Communist China in the game anyway. Just obviously infiltrating provinces, sabotaging them, and also establishing guerrilla cells. But I'm not a big fan of this system, but I'm hoping that this does make it work a little bit better, because it wasn't great in the current iteration. But this system right here, where actually if you carry on with the infiltration, you can then launch a raid, which is in a way the first iteration, I think, of guerrilla warfare being in the game, and it comes in the form of a pop-up raid screen. It's kind of weird for the most part, but obviously Communist China was, heavily involved in guerrilla fighting in China, going behind the Japanese lines for the most part. That I don't know, obviously, without reworking the entire system of the game, if they could ever actually implement guerrilla warfare to a high degree. Not even a high degree, just to a workable degree. So it is nice that they're attempting to put something here to kind of replicate that and represent what the Chinese, front for the Communist Chinese actually look like in the form of guerrilla warfare. But I don't know if this is it, I'll be real. Now, there is a little bit in here about nationalist China as well, but, I don't think it's anything groundbreaking for me to show you right now. But one thing I did obviously want to show, which isn't in this dev diary in particular, is the new faction rework. So if you didn't know, I actually kind of predicted this in my, what video was it? It was when I was talking about what's next for Hoi 4, and I did say one of the big things, one of the, bit of wiggle room, Paradox has to actually implement a new DLC with new features was the faction system. So you can all give me a pat on the back for, consulting with the Mayans, who thankfully have predicted everything right for me so far. So I do think this is a very early iteration of the new faction dynamics and how they are going to work in the game. So, things are probably going to change for the most part, and this is, again, a very basic screen, but you can kind of see where Paradox is going with this. And a lot of the things they have talked about, I do like the sound of. It does give a lot more flavor to factions, gives you a whole bunch of cooperation between the members in said factions, and also, just looks like an actual mechanic that won't make you just, forget about it really existing, other than when you just see a really annoying enemy join a faction you don't want them to be in. So in this dev diary in particular, they do talk about how the new faction system will work and how it's all about cooperation between the members, specifically how they are actually different. So when you're setting up your faction, as we can see with the axis here, their manifest is actually conquest and domination, which kind of makes sense, really. And if I'm reading it correctly in this, the conquest and domination manifest will actually guide what goals you can unlock, and thus what rewards you get from unlocking these goals. So if we actually look further down here, look at the Japanese one. So they've got coastal security, and if they manage to get naval dominance in all of these provinces, blah blah blah, you get 1 faction initiative points for greater East Asia Conspirator, 500 faction power, and Navy experience for every member. And with this faction goal, I'm kind of hoping that this is actually a way for you to, target your AI to actually give them a goal to push towards, if they'll actually listen to you and cooperate with you, which I guess is the whole point of this whole thing in the first place. Or if it's just kind of like a loose mission system and the AI won't really follow it and it will just all be down to you, which I kind of hope it isn't like that. It would be nice to actually see the AI, if I set you guys, we really got to secure North Africa, the Italians don't just put 4 divisions there and get overrun within a day. Although that would be pretty historically accurate. But it is interesting how this gives a bit more of a guide, again, for players, and I'm assuming the AI as well, trying to give them, specific things to achieve for their faction, and in turn, their own country, because if you actually go down to read, what some of the German ones would be, they're all things that would be super relevant for the AI and yourself even, strive for, like securing the resource supply, faction members control resources enough to ensure that they could be at war with the world for some time, a European faction, get European continental countries to either join your faction or capitulate, become part of you, secure North Africa, control key areas in and on the way to North Africa to ensure the safety of the core access territory of continental Europe. All this stuff, obviously, is just a guiding hand. And, if you're the guy in charge, you're playing single player, you're Germany, it's probably easy enough for you to do all this on your own, but it would, again, be really nice if this does kind of, push your AI allies to actually do what you are telling them to do. I'm not too sure it's going to work like that. I'm really hoping it does so. And we do have other manifests as well, like strategic resource control for Japan, which makes sense. A lot of, the pushes for Japan, especially in the, the 40s onwards, after they actually do get involved by, declaring on the Allies, is literally about securing resources. And we go down the Allies. The Allies, on the other hand, have a slightly different set of goals. They start with just a few, and then they can get a few more through focuses and or events, but this is what it looks like relatively early on. Guardians of Peace, the Atomic Race, the Arteries of Trade, and Imperial Glory, which, kind of makes sense for the Allies. I am interested what they mean by actually unlocking more of these. For the Allies, obviously, you're in a way more of a defensive posture, and you're not in the, the terms of conquest like Japan and the Axis will be. But how will this actually work? Say if you go non-historical as well, I think this is a very early look, but you can kind of already see, for the most part, how things are going to be looking, and we got a lot more questions coming up, but for the most part now, I like it. It's very early days, but it is looking pretty good. Now, things looking pretty good doesn't mean they are going to be pretty good, though. This could just come out, it could be just another hindrance, an annoyance, the AI won't follow it, or just be another, spanner in the wrench of the works, and not fun is what I'm trying to say. But fingers crossed, I'd like to have fun in Hoi 4, please. Please. And then the very last dev diary that I want to look at, that is going to be, I think, the largest change for Hoi 4 in maybe the history of the game. And that is coal. A brand new resource for the game, which won't fuel your production, but will fuel your industry as a whole. If you don't know what I mean by that, whilst, steel will go straight into a gun or a tank or something like that, coal will now go into your factories to power them. And honestly, this could be really hit or miss for the game. Specifically, what they're aiming to do is try and get control of factory bloat. Specifically, you just getting a huge factory count just out of nowhere. Trying to control the factories that happen so you don't end up with like 500 factories in 1940 or something like that. Now, there's a lot of specific information that is going to be going on into here, but coal is going to change a lot of stuff. Specifically, not really letting you just go straight into war economy mode, as you're not really going to have the resources to do so. And on top of that, it does kind of give you not just a meta to staying on a lower mobilization for the most part, not just going straight up to total mob or even war economy or even partial mobilization, actually staying further down, even particularly on civilian economy, to really get like a slow burn of your economy going, really. And I do like that. I think it could work for a lot of nations. Obviously, this could come out and be absolutely horrendous and everyone might hate it, but I'm not too doomer on it. not just yet. It's going to be one hell of a change for Hearts of Iron 4, and I do think it makes sense for the most part. There are no limitations for your factory. It is just an endless snowball in the game until you literally have no building slots left. And, if you're going to conquer the world anyway, I don't think this is going to stop you too damn much, but, if you're just doing like a normal Hoi 4 game, you're going historical, it is really going to matter in the most crucial of points for you to get that balance on your economy. I know already some people are probably just, absolutely hating the sound of this, but I think it won't be too bad. It does actually, talk about how specifically most, if not all, economic laws will also have a factory energy consumption modifiers, which will essentially either increase or decrease how much each factory, including the scale portion from size of the factory, will demand energy. Higher mobilization laws will have higher energy demands. So like I said, you're really going to have to balance where your mobilization is. You can't just not even think about it anymore, just go straight up to war economy because what's that? The lights are out. It's definitely gonna get some, getting used to. I can tell you that damn much. But I'm looking forward to it in a way. I do think that, the factory, scaling and endless snowball is a bit boring and repetitive over time. Specifically, if you're always going to late game, it's annoying to see like every nation in the game, or at least every great power, ending up with 500 plus factories. But I'm cautiously optimistic. It could go absolutely horrendous. You never know. Just like everything I've talked about today. But those are the big ones coming up for Hoi 4. I am very interested to see what you guys think, what you're excited for. And obviously, we have a lot more dev diaries coming up. Specifically, the one I am excited for is Japan. But until then, my little slop nation, let me know what you think down below in the comments, or if there's anything else you want me to talk about in terms of like slop stuff. What type of videos would you like to see? What type of videos have you enjoyed so far on the slop channel? I just kind of wake up some days and I'm like, you know what? Let's have a little old natter with those people that just are forced to listen to me. Yep, you're my little captive audience. But if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe down below, and yeah, I guess I'm gonna keep my eyes peeled. Let me know what you think. Catch you next time.